While I'm speaking, I'm going to be showing some pictures, no sound. Just a few visuals to maybe put flesh and blood on the words that I'm saying. You get an idea of some of the things I'm talking about, just not using it as a PowerPoint or referring to it, just some pictures you might want to watch. Question I have for you all to consider this morning on the basis of Matthew 25 verses 35 to 45. The words of Jesus when he said, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked, you clothed me. I was in prison, you visited me. I was thirsty and you gave me to drink. And many will ask, Lord, when did we see you naked and thirsty and with no clothes? When did we see you? And he said, whatever you've done to the least of these, my brethren, you've done it unto me. So my question is this, have you seen Jesus lately? Do you know what he looks like? You know, it's interesting, there's no picture and really no description. There's a description a little bit in Isaiah, not particularly flattering, it's just an average person. We don't really know what Jesus looks like, and yet we do, because he just told us in that gospel. I was naked, I was hungry, I was thirsty. You see, when we give a drink to somebody, if a little boy comes to me in a third world country like Nicaragua and says, Mister, you got any water in that jug? I haven't had a drink all day long, I'm thirsty. So I give him a drink. Drink as much as you like. What have I just done? Did I give a drink to a little thirsty boy? Not really. I gave a drink to Jesus. I was thirsty, and you gave me to drink. Whatever you've done to the least of these, you've done it unto me. So have you served Jesus lately? Have you seen him lately? Let me share with you a little bit about some third world countries. Some of you have been to third world countries. I know by speaking to different people, many will say your descriptions are totally accurate. I've been in India. Or maybe I've been in some place in Latin America. If you haven't been there, it's almost impossible to describe it. Because so often, if you haven't had a certain experience in life, you'll never understand it. I could never really understand why my uncles, and they were all in World War II, would never talk about World War II. Uncle Freddie was in the Normandy invasion. I'd ask him, Uncle Freddie, what was it like? What was it like? I've had a little experience with ships. Did you go in an Amtrak, or how did you make money? It was bad. It was bad. Tell me more. It was bad. That's all I want to say. And yet those who have been in combat any place, or had different experiences, would say, I can't really describe it. Because if you weren't there, you wouldn't understand. And there's so many situations in life you wouldn't understand. I know there's not a man here this morning that foolish who would say to his wife after she's gone through a real tough pregnancy and is in labor for hour after hour after hour, he would not say to her, sweetheart, I know just how you feel. That might be a slap in the face. You don't know. And so I try to describe, whether I use pictures or stories or illustrations, what it's like to be destitute. Okay, now there are two kinds of issues here. There's poverty and there's destitution. We have a lot of poverty in America, and tragically it's growing. It's growing in our large inner cities, in our big cities. Poverty. We have zero destitution in America. What's the difference between poverty and destitution? Big difference. Poverty is when you have nothing. But there's always a place to go. Even when it's 2 below zero or 20 below zero, there's a place you can get some food, there's a place you can get a blanket, there's a place that you can go for help if you want to. Destitution is when there's no place to go. And that's the hard thing to understand. To understand where people are in a situation where there's no place to go, like getting food. If you can't get food, you're going to die. And your children. And this is the way it is in so many of our third world countries who are our neighbors, like Haiti, or like many in Latin America, Central America. What do you do, Mom? What do you do, Grandma? If you have children and grandchildren haven't eaten for 3, 4 days, 5 days, their stomachs become distended. You can count their ribs and they're screaming with hunger pangs. I have never experienced hunger pangs of intensity. And there are people who say if you have hunger pangs, it's one of the worst pains you can have in your life. But there's no food. You can't go to the pantry, you can't go to the refrigerator. You don't have those things. You don't have electricity. So what does the mother do? What the mothers do in Haiti, and they do this also in San Salvador, and places also in the mountains of Central America, they go up to the riverbanks and they scoop up some mud and clay and make little patties about this big in diameter. And then they put them out in the sun on sheets like a cookie sheet and let them dry. So when a child is screaming of hunger pangs, they'll break off a little piece. This is a little sugar cookie. We call them sugar cookies. And you break off a little piece like this, and you put a little sugar on it, maybe a little Kool-Aid if you have some, and give this to a child. You give him mud and clay. And that does work for a time, because there's something in the stomach. But by the same token, there's something else in this sugar cookie. You don't see it, but it's called bacteria. And that bacteria gets in those little tummies and stretches those muscles and causes a greater pain than they've ever experienced. We plead with the women, do not use these. And you find them on the streets all over in Lutheran, all over in Haiti. You find them so common. But now, here we come to a dilemma, and it's a very critical part of ministry to the destitute who have nothing. How do you communicate to an illiterate woman who herself has had 0 prenatal care, horrible diets, and so often have a much higher rate of birth deficiencies, birth defects in their youngsters? How do you explain to her what a bacteria is? She's illiterate. And we try to help her. But more often than not, what she will do is run to the voodoo priest. And he'll kill a few chickens. It used to be babies. We see some of this developing even in South Florida, in the immigration area. You may have some even in Texas, I don't know. You do in Southern California. As people come trying to have a better life. But what do you do to explain that? And that brings us really to a critical juncture of food for the poor. To simply give people food is not an answer. In fact, that's part of the problem. What we want to give them is an education. Even though we feed thousands of people, I think the number is something like 23,000 people every day in 17 countries where we serve, we learn very early that that's not a solution. Welfare is not a solution in any situation. It destroys initiative. It destroys a person's own self-esteem and dignity. And that's why the largest expenditure of money that we spend is for education. It's in support of schools and then orphanages and building little houses for the people. We've built over 250,000 in the last 35 years. We start with feeding. We have feeding kitchens. In fact, I've spent a lot of time in our facility in Haiti. And at one time I was dishing out rice, and our distribution of food is much different than you would in this country here. People have to come to our feeding centers. They bring their own pails, their own buckets, their own receptacles. They have to go through a screening system. We have all this data on computers. They come to register. Their registration is good for 6 months only, and then they got to reapply again. We know the situation. We employ quite a few people in the local economy. And we train them, we teach them how to use the computer and how to run a feeding center. And when they come and register, then they're given a number, they're given a card. might be 1 to 7 or 8. That means how many people are they coming to feed? And I was dishing out rice one day, a little fella came and held up 5. That means I put in 5 servings of rice. Lady next to me put in 5 pieces of meat, usually some kind of pork, and then 5 servings of veggies, and some bread, and some drinks, and they're on their way. You go home and you feed your family. And this little boy was waiting for his buddy. My arm was getting real tired. I'm not used to this motion. Wet rice is heavy. So I took a little break, and I went out in the courtyard with literally hundreds of people in the course of the day, thousands. And I saw this fellow. I just filled up his bucket, and he's sitting in the front row waiting for his buddy to come. He's just sitting there looking at his food, and I said, "Are you hungry?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Why don't you eat? I haven't seen you eat. You don't take any food." He said, "I can't." "What do you mean you can't?" He said, "Today's not my day to eat." I said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "In my family, the girls eat 4 days a week and the boys eat 3 days a week. Today is not my day to eat." That stunned me. Just figure out I can't have food from, I can't eat it. I went back to the window and I told the lady relieving me, "Give me a plate of food. I got a new friend out here, he's hungry." She fixed a plate of food and I went to my little friend. I said, "Here, take some food. This is for you. You're not taking anything from your sisters. This is for you." He took a morsel and put the rest in his pail. I said, "Why don't you eat the whole thing?" And he said with a little edge in his voice, "I told you, I don't cheat on my sisters." And I found that particular attitude so common among the destitute. They look out for each other. Not me first, I want to get in the head of the line. I was in El Salvador having lunch at one of our schools. And I had my box of chicken like everybody else, but I never eat one with the kids. I give them whatever I have. I carry a lot of protein bars and pens. I give this stuff away to the kids. And I was sitting talking to the kids. They're at grade school. And my box of chicken was just sitting there. And I saw a little boy looking at that, he was about 5th grader. And I thought, you want that drumstick?" I said, "Yeah." "You're not going to eat it, yeah?" I said, "Here, you can have it." And he sniffed it a little bit, and then he put it in his lunch pail. I said, "Why do you do that?" He said, "I'm taking that home for my baby brother." The girl across from me, she got the wing. I said, "She did the same thing. What are you doing with it?" "I'm taking that home for my grandma." They think automatically of preservation for each other. They care for one another. They look out for one another. But we moved away. Not we moved away. We added a different dimension that we began to understand the dynamics. The dynamic is not to give them food. The old saying is true. You give them out of fish for a day, you feed them for a day. Teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. And it was not so soon after our development, we began to look at how can we help the schools and how can we help the other agencies that are working. And that's where we began to understand the phenomenal need for education for the citizens. We learned a lot of things from the Taiwanese and the Orientals. But let me switch gears a little bit. We're still sort of in the basking of the glow of 500 years of Reformation. And in the context of what we are doing, I can't think of a better example than going back to look at Martin Luther. Martin Luther was not just a reformer. Martin Luther was a fabulous scholar in many areas, and one that we do not emphasize maybe enough is education. Luther wrote rather extensively on education. And I learned this, by the way, from an admiral in the Navy who happened to be Jewish, and his father was the synagogue, the rabbi of the synagogue in Philadelphia, the largest Reformed synagogue east of Mississippi. We were having dinner one night with a group of people, chaplains, and this admiral, Bert Cornwell was his name. He said to me, "Chaplain Bowles, I understand you're a Lutheran, is that right?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "Why don't you Lutherans ever study anything about your own history?" "Excuse me?" I said, "I know about my history." This admiral's father was a tremendous historian. He wrote a lot about the Civil War, and I've got about 5 of his books about the Jewish influence in the Civil War. Fascinating. But the admiral, his son told me, he said, if you know your history. Tell me, who started the movement for education for the masses in society? So we'll be more specific. You talk about France, it probably is Cousteau. Talk about America, Ben Franklin had a big role in that. He says, you know your history. And he said, you ever heard of a man named Martin Luther? I said, yes, sir, I've heard of Martin Luther. Did you ever read his sermons on education? I said, probably I've read a lot of his sermons. He said, well, I got a sermon you ever read. I think it was 1534, something like that. And he at one point in his office, he gave it to me. In this sermon, Martin Luther said these words. And now bear in mind, in this generation, in the 1500s, only the upper 5% of the boys of the aristocracy went to school. Upper 5% of the aristocracy, boys, no girls. Luther, preaching in the Wittenberg Castle Church, said these words. Every boy and every girl must be in school. And then he continued on, for it's from the milk of the mother's breast that the gospel goes from age to age. And Martin Luther was among the first to see the tremendous need for education for society. Contemporary with Martin Luther was another, the young monk. Very humble young monk. He took the kids off the streets and took them into monasteries to date down and taught them to read and to write mathematics, arithmetic. His name was Ignatius Loyola. And Ignatius Loyola is the father of the Jesuit Society, the scholars of the Roman Catholic Church. You put a few others in there. But let me ask, as you think about your own history of America, our history, have you ever heard of school by the name of Notre Dame, Fordham, St. Louis University? Have you ever heard of the Concordia system in the Missouri Synod, where we have schools from Portland, Maine to Bronxville, from Austin, Texas to St. Paul, Minnesota, all over the country? You've heard of St. Olaf. Have you heard of Methodist, Southern Methodist in Texas? You can go all over the country and you find these names of Christian schools, Christian names. The original first 4 Ivy League schools were started by Christians. The Pilgrims had it in 1620. In 1627, the little Boston Latin College. There's a man of tremendous wealth who donated much of his wealth to the Boston Latin College. That man's name was Harvard. And it was a seminary for the Pilgrims' kids. Yale was a seminary for the Congregationalists. Presbyterian Seminary was Princeton. It's still one of the great seminaries in America. And you look all over the schools, from California to Maine, from Minnesota to Texas. There are Christian schools, Christian names. How did that happen? How does it happen that the Christian gospel has such an influence in this country? And many of us, if not all of us, are the recipients of the fathers and grandmothers who saw the need for education for the masses. But Martin Luther was one who preached about it in the 16th century. Ignatius Loyola preached about it in the 16th century. All within the church. Same is true of hospitals. Have you ever heard of hospital by the name of St. Mary's, St. Joseph's, Lutheran Hospital, Methodist Hospital, Baptist Hospital? All over America, we have these Christian names. What influence has Christianity had on the American culture? Many people don't understand the phenomenal influence, the bedrock foundation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I cite these because this is what Food to the Poor is all about in third world countries. The largest amount of money that we expend is for hospitals and schools to get people to a point. They don't need handouts, but rather we give them the opportunity to themselves become self-sufficient and to teach others. There's no greater joy that I've seen than a man who finds a job that he can do and he can pay for his kids' education. By the way, we sometimes say, why don't they have a lot of education in third world countries? America is one of the few places, it may be the only, I don't know that for sure, but it's one of the few countries where education is free. Now, sure, we pay taxes, but we expect our children to be in school. If not, we call them truants. They got to be in school because it's so critical that they're in school. We make it possible for everybody to go. And yet the majority of countries in the world do not have free education. And the same, that's particularly true in third world countries. If you want your children to have an education, you got to buy the uniform, you got to buy the books, you got to pay the teacher. And if you're only making $1 or $2 a day, you can't afford to have your kids go to school. And that is where we provide so many scholarships to find children. I wear a Stolz often when I preach, multicolored, given to me by a little 12-year-old girl that was found on a garbage dump. Years ago, one of the first people we found on a garbage dump. We do that a lot. I've walked through garbage dumps in Guatemala, in Central America. On a given day, by the way, in Guatemala City, the biggest garbage dump in Central America, there are about 3,000 people in the garbage dump scavenging. Most of them are old ladies or children looking for a morsel or looking for something to recycle. And that's in our backyard. And finding out that the average population of that particular garbage dump, I've been there on numerous occasions, this is about 3,000 a day. People eking out an existence. But the area in which we are so adamant is giving people the tools, and I can look at this brochure, I'll mention in a minute. But education is so much more than reading, writing, arithmetic in high school and college and university. Vocational education is so big. We tried one time some years ago to build a tilapia pond. Is this working? And a lot of people, one reason I so much enjoy Food to the Poor, in contrast to the church, which is part of the church, is the attitude always is we can't do it. Somebody says, let's try this or that. Nobody says, oh, we tried that, didn't work. Well, maybe the wrong time, let's try it again, let's try it again, let's try it again. But we tried it one tilapia pond, we found out that we can support an average-sized orphanage of 75 kids with the profits of one tilapia pond. Now we have over 350 tilapia ponds. One of the things about island people is they're all fishermen. But if you'd see the boats they go out, the rickety old wooden boats, I wouldn't sit in that boat on shore, let alone out in the water. And I've done a lot of sailing in my day, both the Merchant Marine and the Navy. Some of the Merchant Marine ships I've been on, I don't think now I'm going to have nightmares at night that I was on that boat. But we tried to give people a boat that will work. And so we've come up with Grady White that we can get a nice boat with a 45 Merc engine. We give one boat to 5 fishermen. The fisherman shows the greatest ability, becomes the captain. And then we have 5 boats, that's 25 fishermen. And that is the foundation of a fishing village. Then we'll build about 35 to 50 little houses. And we'll have a community of upwards of 500 plus people in the fishing industry. Now they can go in the deep water. The big fish are in the deep water of the Florida Straits. That's where you buy the big fish. You don't go out there with a rowboat. And so now we have about 80 fishing villages. And we're building many, many new ones in the island countries. Right now, of course, our big effort, even though Puerto Rico is now one of our 17 countries, we were there immediately. In fact, when there's a disaster, like there was in Houston, like there was also in Katrina, and this last summer we had Irma, which I went through. We were without power for 8 days. Food to the Poor has warehouses all over. We got some warehouses in New Orleans. We got warehouses, of course, in Guatemala, in Jamaica, big ones in Jamaica. That we have medical kits, little shoebox things like with basic medical supplies. That while a hurricane is still streaming, we distribute thousands and thousands of these little books. We've got these little boxes. We do that for about a week. Until other American groups are getting organized and coming back in. We were there for the first, immediately while the storm was still brewing. But we brought in, I think it was 18 containers, 40-foot containers in Puerto Rico while the storm was still going on, as we did in South Florida. But we are principally in these 17 countries, but we just made a decision that we've been in Puerto Rico now since the storm hit, and we're going to stay there indefinitely. We've got about 10 teams there. We've already shipped them over close to 100 containers of goods because they're in our warehouses. And that even though we are still 17 countries, we still do reach out when there's a tremendous crisis immediately. God's grace is seen among us all the time. So as I share with people the message of Food for the Poor, I want to basically communicate how we work together with so many different groups. There are over 9,000 charities registered, and many of them are very excellent, good charities. Some are scams, there's no question. You have to check out your scam. Of course, we are in the top tier with Navigator, all the groups, the government, fulfilling all the obligations, and yet work with others that do the same thing. A couple of years ago, when we had that storm hitting in Haiti, it was really, I just really enjoyed an experience I had. I was there with them. We were building houses and fixing houses on one side of the street. Habitat was across the street. We were using their materials. They were using our trucks and earth-moving equipment. Down the street was Franklin Graham and the Samaritan Purse. On the other side was Feed the Hungry Children. And they're wonderful organizations. And out in the bay was the U.S. Navy ship, I think it was the Mercy was out there, the Comfort, one of the two, the hospital ship. And we're all working together. It's beautiful that we can work together. And when you work together, obviously it's much more economical. We can buy things, we don't buy everything. We get things donated free of charge. We don't raise enough money to go over $1 billion in churches, but we have tremendous support from corporate America also. People are not aware of that. We still have many supplies in storage in America. We have grain. We have all kinds of different foodstuffs in storage. And there are times when the USDA will come to us and ask if we can use this or that. About a year ago, they said they got enough powdered milk to feed a couple thousand kids for the next 5 years. Can you use it? We took it out. We use everything. Broward County hospitals, they all got some of these new hospital beds. And we have 1,500 hospital beds that are in excellent condition, which we took down to some of the countries in the third world. And so we get tremendous support. We get support from pharmaceuticals. Sometimes we can use outdated medicines. We have a board of directors who are board just with doctors and medical people who analyze all these different medications. And some can be out of date by a month or 2 or 3 years. They're still perfectly good. Others are not. And that's why doctors review all these things. So there are different ways in which we work with one another. And it is so refreshing. But I do want to say very quickly, Food for the Poor consists of 5 basic churches. And what I mean with that, we are Roman Catholic, Lutherans, all kinds, Episcopalian, Methodist, and Presbyterian. And they all have a seat on the board, the judicatory head, like the Bishop of South Florida. The district president of the Florida Georgia District has a seat in our board. And Garrett Michael used to be there all the time. And they don't have a vote, but they have a voice if they want to come. Because the whole organization is operated by the laity, by businessmen. And that's such a blessing. That's how you end up with getting 3.6% over $1 billion concept. But we do work with those 5 churches. And why do we use those 5 churches? We do not work with any televangelists. We don't work with any individual megachurch pastors. And the question has to do with accountability. It's not that they are not accountable. We don't know. They don't have to be. But those 5 churches, I mean, we are all accountable. I'm accountable to you, to the district president of the Texas district, and to the synodical president in St. Louis for what I do in Santa Missouri Synod Church. And so is the priest. Every priest is accountable to the bishop, as are the nuns. Episcopalian, same way. We are not only accountable, we are historic churches. We've been around a long time. Lutheran Church has been around a long time. So have the Episcopalians, the Reformation, name it. And so we can assure people of our accountability. And when you're dealing with other people's money, it's a trust. You know how important that is. And we take it as a God-given trust. And that's why we work with those 5 churches. But we work together, and we are not a church. We're not trying to merge churches. We work together on projects of human need. In the brochure this morning, you have that in bulletin. And I've talked a little bit about most of these little things. But I do come, obviously, to ask if you can provide a gift for us with this work. And I've written this envelope here right from that brochure. It's by the yellow line, the big yellow line. You can read that. And there's an envelope here. See, I'll make an envelope on my physician. And that envelope can put money in there. And $100 bills work fine. You can just fold them over. But you can also put a check in there. And all you have to do is take a check out of the checkbook, rip it out of the checkbook, sign the bottom right-hand line, and I'll fill it on fine. A house is only $3,600. Some churches, often a lot of churches, as a church project, buy a house. Some people as an individual buy a house. Nothing gives you more dignity at any time than a fresh house rather than what you've seen on the screen there this morning. Some of the shacks. Use a credit card. You don't even have to have one. All I need is some valid numbers. So borrow them from somebody. Give me some numbers. You know, I'm sort of facetious when I talk about it because I have never liked to talk about money in the church. I really don't. I don't like scripture Sundays. I've heard the people of God will respond and according to their heart's direction. And I'm not going to talk anybody in it or talk anybody out of it. People will do what people will do. Particularly when it comes to finances. If there's a need and it's one that people respond. It's not they won't respond. And I find that's fine. Because I know you have other opportunities, you have other issues. You maybe have grandchildren that need more support. Or you have friends, whatever it may be. But if you can provide a gift of food for the poor, at the end of the service, I'll stand by that door back there. And you can't get out unless you give me an envelope. But you might be able to sneak around the corner. But we do save so hardly. Whether it's a large gift or small gift, to me it's irrelevant. I got an envelope one time, there was 37 cents in there. A little boy told me at the door, he said, I think if you need some more, I can get a little bit more. To me, that was $1 million, 37 cents. It's amazing what goes through the hearts of people, in particular children. I had a little girl one time, and I saw it was a big church, and there were 3 services. At the 8 o'clock service, I saw people were coming through at the front of the church. A little girl, maybe 5th, 6th grader, was talking to her mother. There was a little discussion going on. And she came through the door and gave me $20. Later on, after the 3rd service, I noticed that little girl was still in the narthex back there. Her family, they lived in the parsonage, which was right next to the church. And after the people had left, she came up to me and said, I gave you some money this morning, but that wasn't my money, that was from my mommy's purse. I went home to my house and I got my piggy bank. I'm going to give that to you. It was this little leather case. And I said, it's such a beautiful little case, leather. You want to take your money out, keep? No, she said, give some to the girl the piggy bank. I said, that's $1 million, or more than that. It's not the amount of money. It's whether or not one wants to respond. And that's the way it always is, whatever you support. P.T. Niles was a great missionary, and he said once, or somebody asked him, what does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus Christ? And he said, I'll tell you very simply and remember it. A disciple of Jesus Christ is one poor beggar showing another poor beggar where to find a piece of bread. But it wasn't Dr. Niles who first said that, was Martin Luther. Martin Luther was quoted by Dr. Niles. One poor beggar showing another beggar where to find a piece of bread. We've got the bread right here. That's the bread of Jesus Christ, his body and his blood. But there are many who are starving, not because there's no food or drink. They're starving because they don't have the bread and the blood of Jesus Christ in their veins. And that's our task. Wherever we go, we not only share the gospel, we do the gospel. We do the gospel. It's an action. Thank you, Pastor. Let me share a little message from the congregation. Sometimes it's a little longer. Pastor Kurt knows how to do it.
There's got to be more than going back and forth, from doing right to doing wrong, 'cause we were taught that's who we are. Well, come on, get in line right behind me, you along with everybody, thinking there's worth in what you do. Then like a hero who takes the stage when we're on the edge of our seat, saying it's too late. Well, let me introduce you to amazing grace. No matter the bumps, no matter the bruises, no matter the scars, still the truth is the cross has made, the cross has made you flawless. The cross has made you flawless. No matter the hurt or how deep the wound is, no matter the pain, still the truth is the cross has made, the cross has made you flawless. Could it possibly be that we simply can't believe that this unconditional kind of love would be enough to take a filthy wretch like this and wrap him up in righteousness? But that's exactly what he did. No matter the bumps, no matter the bruises, no matter the scars, still the truth is the cross has made, the cross has made you flawless. Has made you flawless. No matter the hurt or how deep the wound is, no matter the pain, still the truth is the cross has made, the cross has made you flawless. Oh yeah. Take a breath, smile and say right here, right now,